6:17, December 13, 1939. The mouth of the River Plate, off the coast of Uruguay and Argentina. 3 British and Commonwealth cruisers, 1 heavy and 2 light, close on a German raider that outguns every one of them individually and outclasses their armor completely. Within 6 minutes, the heaviest of the 3 has taken repeated hits from 11-inch shells, every one of her main gun turrets eventually knocked out, 61 of her crew dead. On paper, this fight should already be over, and not in Britain's favor. Instead, within 4 days, the German ship will lie scuttled in the mud of the same river mouth, deliberately sunk by her own crew, without another shot fired in anchor. And her captain will be dead by her own hand 2 days after that. The 3 cruisers that fought her never sank the Admiral Graf Spee. They destroyed her anyway. By December 1939, the Admiral Graf Spee had spent roughly 9 weeks raiding Allied merchant shipping across the South Atlantic and Indian Ocean, sinking 9 ships totaling around 50,000 tons, without taking a single life among their crews, a point of professional pride for her captain, Hans Langsdorff, who consistently removed merchant crews to safety, fed and housed them aboard his own ship or a supply tanker, and set them ashore or transfer them to other vessels before sinking anything they had been sailing. That restraint made her no less dangerous strategically. A single-pocket battleship, purpose-built under the restrictions of the Treaty of Versailles to outgun anything fast enough to catch her and outrun anything heavy enough to sink her, was forcing Britain and France to disperse naval resources across 9 separate hunting groups spread over 2 oceans just to have a chance of finding her.
One of those groups, Force G, under Commodore Henry Harwood, patrolled the South American coast with the heavy cruiser HMS Exeter and the cruiser HMS Cumberland. After Harwood correctly guessed Graf Spee would eventually be drawn toward the rich shipping lanes off the River Plate, he detached Cumberland to the Falklands and instead concentrated Exeter with the light cruisers HMS Ajax and HMNZS Achilles, the latter crewed largely by New Zealanders, off the estuary itself. Naval doctrine of the era was unambiguous about what cruisers should do when they found a pocket battleship: shadow her, report her position, and wait for heavier ships to close the trap, because a direct engagement was considered close to suicidal. Graf Spee's 6 11-inch guns outranged and outweighed anything Exeter, Ajax, or Achilles could fire back, and her armored belt was built specifically to shrug off cruiser-caliber shells at any range where cruisers could realistically expect to hit her. Exeter carried only 6 8-inch guns and cruiser-grade plating. Ajax and Achilles carried nothing heavier than 6-inch guns and even less protection. Harwood ignored the cautious option entirely. His standing order to his captains, issued before contact was even made, was blunt. With 3 cruisers against 1 pocket battleship, attack at once, by day or by night, the moment contact was made, rather than shadow and wait for a bigger force that might never arrive in time, or might arrive only after Graf Spee had slipped away to sink another dozen merchant ships. Harwood's tactical answer to being outgunned was to make Graf Spee's targeting problem harder rather than his own firepower bigger. He split his 3 cruisers into 2 divisions, sending Exeter to approach from one bearing, while Ajax and Achilles worked around together from another, forcing Langsdorff to choose between dividing his 6 main guns across 2 separated targets or concentrating on one group while leaving the other free to close the range unengaged. It was an answer built entirely around geometry and nerve rather than any advantage in steel. 3 under-armored cruisers, moving fast and from multiple directions at once, were harder to fight efficiently than one ship shadowing at a safe distance, however much heavier her broadside. When the battle opened at 6:17, Graf Spee initially split her fire across both divisions before concentrating everything on Exeter, and the effect was immediate and brutal. Within 6 minutes, Exeter had taken serious hits. Over the course of the engagement, she lost first 1 turret, then a second, then finally her last. A direct hit wrecked her bridge, killing or wounding everyone on it except Captain Frederick Bell and 2 others. When the aft conning position proved just as badly wrecked, Bell kept the ship in action, steering by a handheld boat's compass, relaying his orders through a human chain of messengers passed down through the wrecked communication system, with her sole remaining gun firing under local control, before she was too badly damaged to continue and turned away toward the Falkland Islands for repairs, having lost 61 of her crew killed and 23 wounded. While Graf Spee's guns were on Exeter, Ajax and Achilles closed the range hard, drawing fire onto themselves and inflicting damage of their own with their lighter 6-inch guns. Ajax took 7 hits that disabled 2 of her turrets and killed 7 of her crew, while Achilles lost 4 of her New Zealand crew. By the time the running battle broke off after roughly an hour and 20 minutes of close, violent gunnery,
Graf Spee herself had absorbed enough damage, including hits to her fuel processing system that threatened her ability to refine usable oil from her remaining bunkers, that Langsdorff turned for the neutral port of Montevideo, rather than press on toward open ocean and the long voyage back to Germany. If a battle decided as much by tactics and nerve as by any ship's armor plate is the kind of naval history that keeps you coming back to this channel, subscribing costs nothing and brings the next one straight to you. Under the Hague Convention rules governing neutral ports, Uruguay allowed Graf Spee only 72 hours in Montevideo, rather than the 14 days Langsdorff requested, nowhere near enough time to make her seaworthy for the run back to Germany, even if the way home had been clear. What made the next 4 days decisive was not any further shellfire, but a deliberate campaign of deception run by the British minister in Montevideo, Eugene Millington Drake, who arranged for signals to be sent over channels the Germans were known to be monitoring, including a plain language request to Argentine authorities to prepare fuel for battlecruisers supposedly arriving imminently. Graf Spee's own lookouts reported sighting the battlecruiser HMS Renown and the carrier HMS Ark Royal waiting outside the estuary, ships that were, in reality, still days away.
Believing a force capable of annihilating his ship was waiting just beyond the harbor mouth, Langsdorff chose not to fight his way out. On December 17th, he ordered Graf Spee scuttled in the shallow water of the River Plate estuary, in full view of crowds who had gathered along the Montevideo waterfront, expecting to watch a final battle that never came. Commodore Harwood was promoted to Rear Admiral that same day, December 13th, and was appointed Knight Commander of the Order of the Bath in the New Year's honors less than 3 weeks later, a rapid formal recognition of an action whose full strategic value was still becoming clear. 2 days after ordering the scuttling, on December 19th, Langsdorff addressed his surviving crew, wrote letters to his family and to the German ambassador, and shot himself, choosing, in his own words, to accept responsibility for the ship's loss rather than let his men be blamed for a decision he alone had made under a threat that existed only on a tapped telephone line and in a lookout's mistaken report. The Battle of the River Plate became Britain's first major naval victory of the Second World War, arriving during the so-called phony war when good news of any kind was scarce, and it landed as a significant propaganda and morale boost on the home front at exactly the moment it was needed. Strategically, it validated the entire resource-hungry hunting group concept that had dispersed cruisers across 2 oceans to find a single raider, vindicating the decision to tie down so many ships in pursuit of one commerce raider rather than concentrating them elsewhere.
It also demonstrated something subtler that would echo through the rest of the naval war, that a warship's paper specifications, however dominant, were only ever as good as the information her captain trusted, and that a well-placed piece of deception could achieve what several cruisers' worth of gunfire alone had not quite managed. Winston Churchill, then First Lord of the Admiralty, addressed the nation by radio on December 18th to announce the scuttling, and later welcomed the returning crews home by calling their engagement a brilliant sea fight that had, in the cold and dark of that first wartime winter, warmed the cockles of the British heart. None of what happened between December 13th and 19th, 1939 was decided purely by the numbers on a specification sheet. On paper, Exeter, Ajax, and Achilles were badly outgunned and out-armored by a ship purpose-built to defeat exactly their class of vessel, and Graf Spee left the battle still afloat, still armed, and still faster than at least one of the cruisers that had engaged her. What the specifications could not measure was a Commodore willing to split his weaker force into 2 problems instead of 1, and a diplomat willing to lie convincingly enough over a line he knew was being listened to, that a fully capable warship chose to destroy herself rather than test whether the lie was true. Admiral Graf Spee had been built to outgun anything she could not outrun, and outrun anything she could not outgun. She was never built to survive being told, in effect correctly from her own captain's point of view, even though the specific threat was invented, that the safest thing left to do was give up a fight that had not even started, rather than risk the one that supposedly waited beyond the harbor mouth.